My name is Charles, and my last name is Nyaga, Nyaga. I am originally from Kenya, and I'm 59 years old. I've lived in the United States now for 20 years. I came back in 1996. And I love it here now. I came to the United States first of all, for school. I wanted to do education. I wanted to improve myself, my own career development. And so the opportunities in Kenya at that time were very limited. So I looked for schools in the United States and I moved in 1996 with my family. The American system also offers more freedom than most of the other countries for that period of time. I am very human, so quite a few times I would sit and think, why am I even doing this? You know, it's much easier to go back to what I had before, even though that means beginning all over again, because I had I had given up most of what I had, my career in Kenya as a teacher. And so, I had many times when I felt really like giving up. But I guess again, through the God's power, I believe, kept saying, no, don't give up. Don't give up. Just hang on there. And you can imagine that's a long wait, because I think we waited for a good 10 years before that happened. And so that's God's power. I cannot say it's me who did that, because I wouldn't do it by myself. But it was, I remember that very well, and it's God's doing. I was a technical teacher. I taught post-secondary school college in Kenya. I taught agricultural mechanics, engineering, and also auto mechanics, as well as in some cases even courses like economics, land economics, civics, and all that, in the absence of teachers, because we had shortages all over the place. And as a teacher, we were taught, one of the things we were taught, even a day is too long, it's too far away. We as teachers are supposed to think on our feet, because students will be testing us all the time, and you have to keep thinking, you have to process a lot of things at the same time as you stand. So we think on our feet as teachers, and so you have to be ready, because you never know what's coming, and you cannot stop the class and step back to think about something. So we as teachers, we are trained to process material very quickly and think on our feet. So moving forward, I have registered a small non-profit organization, and the purpose of that is to do more of what I am doing here at the cafe: pastoral care, training, job training, cultural training, and also basic computer skills for those who come from outside of the United States without knowledge or any help with computers, and they need to start from scratch. Open a school there, a training facility for training immigrants who come in, and we can sit with them. But that's an entry point. Job search and resume building is an entry point. And the point is for them to talk their stories out, so that we can have a conversation, because I think that piece lacks in the community, where when immigrants come, and especially if they are refugees, they have very little, or perhaps nobody really takes the time to listen to their stories, their personal stories, which are who they are. And so for me, that is one thing I would like to do going forward at a much deeper level, so that they also feel wanted and welcome to the United States. There are immigrants, refugees who come and live in the United States for a long time before they hear anybody tell them welcome to America. And I would love to do that. And for me, I would want to connect with them so that they feel that they are not alone.
My name is Zakir Hussain. I born and grew up in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is the central of Asia. A good experience that I had in my life is, everybody has their childhood experience and their childhood friends. I really miss them, and right now I didn't have some of them is not alive, so I really miss them, and I had a nice childhood experience with them. So actually in Afghanistan there is not a safe country. As I born and grew up here, I was in war, and every time, actually I can say that most of the time, I heard bad sounds like explosion sounds and some crying sounds. It was my bad experience. But the good experience that I had in my life is I actually miss my homelands, the area that I born and grew up. But I had to move because it was not safe for me. So I lost none of my friends over there. So it was not guaranteed to their life still when I've been over there. So that's why I moved. And everybody I think can miss the place that born and grew up there, even this in bad condition. Now I've been 25 years old when I moved to America. I actually moved in 2012 by the end of 2012 from Afghanistan to Pakistan, and then went to Indonesia. There was UNHCR. I heard that UNHCR, they always accept the refugees and send to the safe countries. I was not looking for America actually. I was looking for safe countries I can continue the rest of my life in safety places, in safe areas. So that's why I had planned to move from Pakistan to Indonesia. Then I've been registered with UNHCR, United High Commissioner for Refugees. And after a while, they took interview, and they said, yeah, you are qualified as real refugees because you already had a problem and you lost your fathers and some of your friends, and your area is unsafe for you guys. So called me that I want to send your application and your documents to United States. I said it's fine. It's so glad for me that I heard this news that you sent me to US Embassy. Actually, when I came in America, I just recommended by my friends. So they told me there is Cafe Clarkston and Friend of Refugees. They always honestly help the refugees and the new people or the jobless people. I was working as a maintenance in apartments in complex. I used to work in 5 properties. I was able to pay my rent and my everything. Yeah, this is good. I feel more comfortable about that. It's natural that everybody has their wishes and their hopes, and they have some plans for their futures. But me, myself, the only important things that I hope it and I wish it and I try to get my family here, because I really miss them, and I'm ahead of my family. I'm supportive of my family either. And this is my biggest wish. I'm talking about my four small sisters, and I have an old mother. So if I can, I'm trying my best to sponsor them to bring here.
I was born in Jamaica, the West Indies, 1943, February 9th. Your grandfather had to ride on a horse to register my birth, and it was 3 days late. So in rural Jamaica, you're registered at the post office. The postmistress, she just assigned me a birthday of February 12th, 1943. So I was born with a contradiction right away. They were opposites that made a whole. My mother was an all-encompassing, loving, deeply religious woman who did not go to high school, but I lecture in her honor because she had her 3 daughters become accomplished women, and she was my most ardent and sustaining role model. Father was the opposite. His mother was an English woman who played the violin. They were descendants of the slave trade in Jamaica. He was very aloof, a very self-made person. You don't show emotions. So the roles for parenting were clearly defined. There was no confusion in my house about what my father's roles were and what my mother's roles were. A kind of parental Valhalla where I could manipulate my existence. Because if you know what the roles are, then it gives you a kind of personal freedom. If you're observant, and if you're not the eldest. I was the middle between 2 girls, and we're all very different. Because of my parents and the way life was imperceptibly structured, I could handle it. But I also understood that there were different compartments that you could strategically place to get what you want in life. And your grandfather was my accomplice. When I became a head girl at that school, which was quite prestigious, by the way, your grandfather threw a party, invited all of my friends, including the boys from the high school, made a big splash in your grandfather's house. And my father, of course, drove us to the party, but he had no idea about why the party was given and why those strange fellows were all around, because your grandfather provided shield. It also means that I was parented by an extended family. And whenever parenting by my mother and or father became constraining and restricting, Chambers clan, they always inevitably came to my rescue. And at age 76, my greatest pleasure is playing the sonatinas on my piano because my grandfather paid and defied my father. So they had, because they were privileged but poor, my mother never worked, but she developed, like West African women do, what I have now come to understand as an underground industry, where she would use whatever the plantations produced. And she had a network of marketing that no one knew about. So I had the freedom to, when I came to America at age 20, to choose. I didn't feel the constraints. I packed my bags and took a Greyhound bus from Bedford-Stuyvesant to Buffalo and then to London, Ontario. So for the first time in my life, I was completely alone I had no money. I knew no one there. So career didn't mean the same thing. It had a more unpleasant connotation based with class and race, which I rejected. Because my elder sister, Verna, was doing everything she was supposed to do. And so when the eldest girl, remember now, you just need one girl to, and then they leave you alone because they have very low expectations. So you were allowed to set your own curve.
Yeah.
My youngest sister was contemplative, and I was in the middle, and so I had a very disciplined elder sister. I was 3 years behind her, and I hid behind her coattails a lot. And my sister Doreen is very introspective, and she was a very smart one. I was the mediocre-minded child. I wasn't considered very smart. So I went to Harvard with my husband, who he hates when I say this, but he is a smart one, I think. I think I'm the enduring one. I worked at a place called the Roxbury Multi-Service Center, and I put into effect my psychology English degree. Remember now, I had a lot of psychoanalytic training in Canada. I worked at the Westminster Psychiatric Hospital, and they were very Freudian, and I was also very taken with Freudian theory. Yeah. I made contact with Chester Millbrook Pierce, and he became my thesis advisor at Harvard, who understood racism and therapy. He got me interested in space, because space is an extreme environment. Yeah. My first grant was the Neurolab mission. We studied the brain in space. My husband's a neuroscientist. And so when I came to Morehouse, I had that grant, and we wrote The Brain in Space for Children. We flew the Neurolab mission. I was head of education for the Neurolab mission in NASA, and I was part of their life sciences committee. Isn't it interesting? That's where I found the missing piece of me, my husband. Over the 50 years, I've just considered myself so fortunate to have met him. So some people get tired of their partners. I think I've become more and more appreciative and in love with my husband over the 50 years. Yeah. Hang on for the ride, and trust yourself, and be an encouraging, inquiring mind.
What a gift it was to walk the streets that he once walked, to see the place where he once lived, and to wonder at how an underserved boy from deep in the American South could be celebrated for his work not only in France, but around the world. Such experiences make one wonder at life's possibilities. Often while drifting off to sleep in Leiden, I listened to the sounds on the street below and wondered how an old white boy from rural Georgia ended up studying in the Netherlands. I've not really thought of my life as particularly noteworthy, but in some ways I can relate to both George and Richard. Sometimes we are compelled to step into the unknown rather than live with what we've known. Growing up in Georgia in the 1960s and 70s, raised in the theologically conservative, even fundamentalist teachings of the Southern Baptist Church, I could not even imagine, much less entertain, the possibility of being gay. Everyone in my world knew that homosexuality was a sin, and those who associated with such evil were destined to burn in hell for all eternity. Countless nights were spent in prayer begging God to take away the blasphemous thoughts and urges which plagued me. I did my absolute best to fit in, to play the role assigned me. Fear of being found out was part of my existence. Lurking behind me, attached to my heels like a dark shadow, the dread of unintentional disclosure of my true sexual orientation haunted my every step. I had reason to fear. During my last semester at seminary, A classmate was asked to leave school because he admitted to being a practicing homosexual, in love with another man. If such was grounds for dismissal, I knew I deserved to be sent away as well, and I sometimes wonder what would have happened had I stepped up alongside him. I knew that coming out as gay would mean the end of a career in the church before it really began. But eventually, the need to live authentically became stronger than my fear of being cast out by those whose opinions mattered most to me at the time. There came a moment when the dream of what could be empowered me to leave behind what had been. Frightening? Yes. Worth it? Absolutely. Claiming and living one's truth gives one the power to risk and reach toward the next great adventure. All my life, I have had an urge to travel. In fact, my father used to say my middle name is Go. At this point, I don't know that I have a desire to travel as much as I have a need to travel. I wanted to visit the Netherlands from the time I first heard of Dr. Redmond's study abroad trip. I've been out of the U.S. a number of times and had even led trips abroad, but the idea of going as a student in a group of students was very appealing. I cannot adequately express my gratitude for being included in this band of enthusiastic travelers, and I have learned more than can easily be brought to mind at the moment. Richard Wright wrote that men can starve from a lack of self-realization as much as they can from a lack of bread. One of the many gifts offered on this trip abroad has been an opportunity to reflect on who I am, why I am, and what I'm doing with my life. Traveling in a group helps one do the work of reflecting in ways that are not possible while journeying alone. I am very grateful to the members of our Leiden family for the ways each has impacted my life. There is no way to recount every significant moment, but my heart smiles each time a memory crosses my mind. I mentioned earlier that the fear of being outed was attached to me like a dark shadow, and I lived in fear of being discovered. I still face moments of doubt and shadow, feelings of unworthiness and self-doubt, but I have a new perspective. While walking in the Netherlands one day, I watched my shadow move before me, and an interesting thought entered my mind. It suddenly occurred to me that we only see our shadows when we face away from the light. When we walk toward the light, our shadows trail behind. I am so thankful to group members on this journey for helping me keep my face toward the light of friendship and companionship, as well as the light of my own strength, my own worth, my own possibilities. This trip was full of laughter, great stories, food, and fun, which I'll treasure always. But perhaps the greatest gifts I received have been the opportunity to see myself in the loving eyes of encouraging colleagues, and the joy of basking in the unconditional positive regard each of you has offered me. Our bond is true and strong, and regardless of where our paths may lead and what individual adventures we may face, I believe I'll always be able to count on the warmth of our kinship and commitment to each other, knowing without a doubt my verb will be heard. Thank you, my friends. I love you.